Hello and welcome to Dialogue. I'm Yang Wei in Beijing. Nearly 4 decades after 18 farmers in Xiaogang village, Anhui province, broke the law by signing a secret agreement to divide the communal land into individual plots, China is embracing a new era of rural land rights reforms. Why is China separating farmland ownership rights, contract rights, and operating rights? How would that impact the lives of farmers and the agricultural industry? As China's Central Conference on Rural Work concludes its annual gathering, which thorny issues remain to be tackled in next year's rural development? To answer these and other questions, I'm very happy to be joined by Zhang Jianping from the Ministry of Commerce and Professor Liu Baocheng from the University of International Business and Economics. But before we get started, let's take a look at this.
As the year comes to an end, Xiaogang village is undergoing some big changes. Things have come full circle for the village that was an early testbed for farmland ownership rules. Now, Xiaogang village is leading the country in introducing the splitting of farmland ownership rights, contract rights and operating rights for local farmers. This allows more people who want to farm to do so, while letting property owners who would rather not be farming move on to greener pastures.
As the natural progression of industrialization becomes more advanced, a large number of rural laborers have transferred to urban areas. Natural competition is then formed.
The practice of separating ownership and management of a piece of farmland was first adopted secretly in Xiaogang in 1979. It allowed 18 households to divide communally owned farmland into individual blocks. The farmers would then hold all responsibility for profits and losses from the land. This practice was later publicly embraced by Deng Xiaoping in the early 1980s and widely implemented across the country.
To be honest, it was a risk signing that contract back then.
38 years ago, the villagers of Xiaogang put their names and fingerprints on this contract. Many wanted to leave and go work in the city, but someone had to stay and farm the land. Separating ownership from management allowed this arrangement. Fast forward to 2016, and the farmers now are eager to be part of the latest reforms. Farmers can now finally have full access to farmland ownership rights, contract rights and operating rights. The reforms have come a long way.
After you get your certificate, or you could call it a permit, you can easily transfer the operating rights to a third party if you wish to work in the city. And if you wish to farm your own land, now you have a sense of security with this certificate.
With this reform policy, farmers can manage their land with more confidence. The implementation not only satisfies the needs of farmers who wish to migrate to cities, it also helps meet some inevitable demands of modernization.
How important is it to separate the three rights?
My understanding is that in the past, that land rights in China was including two parts. Ownership rights is belonging to so-called villagers committee, and contract rights and operating rights together belonging to villages. So this type of rights allocation actually make China's farmers was more positive, to promote agriculture development in the past. But today you can find that in China, so a lot of farmers, they already, go to urban areas, and maybe they have their jobs in urban areas, but they are reluctant to give up their contract rights. On the other hand, you can find that in China, in order to improve productivity of agriculture, that means that we have to make an effort to make land more concentrated and more modernized. So that means it's time for us to separate contract rights and operating rights. That means, on one hand, we can avoid so a lot of farmers lost their land contract rights in order to prevent from too many poor people produced in the near future. On the other hand, concentrated land operating will increase our productivities.
Is it important to have a farmland consolidation so that the operating rights can be separated and can be guaranteed, I mean?
Well, if you trace back to the initial reform track of China under Deng Xiaoping, that he broke up the Soviet type of commune and distributed all the land back to those individual families. So that really greatly unleashed the incentive of individual farmers to decide on the crops and decide on what type of crops to be sold. So, but right now, after more than 30 years, the limitation is clear that individual plots of land dealt by those individual households are not really productive enough, as Mr. Zhang has pointed out. And so right now, the quality and productivity are the key issues for Chinese land reform. So to ensure that the quality food are being produced, this is something that our current economic conference has really laid great emphasis on. And the other is really productivity. So with small pieces of land restrained by the ownership rights, if you do not really separate the operation, and mechanization, modernization cannot really be applied. So right now, the further reform is in imperative need to really to be able to separate them by respecting the ownership, which is really a legacy and the real need of those farmers. But in the meantime, with so many idling plots, that they need to be combined to be operated under a corporate or co-op type of form. So this is something that is very significant for the decisive move towards the unleashing the productivity of the Chinese farmland.
Other than the issue of separation of the three rights, what are the other major chapters of the government work report on rural economic development? For example, green development of agriculture production and food security. Do you think these are issues of great urgency?
Of course. Today you can find that so a lot of Chinese people actually they are chasing green food, organic food, and high quality agricultural products. Even if some of Chinese when they traveled in other economies and they buy so a lot of local agricultural products, that shows actually there are very strong demand for those type of products. But if you look at today in China, actually many Chinese people are not satisfied for domestic agricultural products. Its quality, if it's belonging to green products and if it's belonging to organic products, even if some of those products they have their labels which says that this is a green products, but still some of consumers just worry about if it's true. So I'm afraid that in China, on one hand, we have to promote, agriculture product producers. They can chase green and organic food production. On the other hand, I'm afraid that ecological label and environmental label also need to be emphasized. This type of label should play important role to make consumers more easy to recognize and to buy.
So there are actually one issue is really security issue. This is something that the government has really been attaching the greatest importance, but the productivity doesn't really support the Chinese security. I mean the current productivity, because every year we import soybeans per se, over 80 million metric tons, primarily from the United States and Brazil. So, without really a modern type of operation, the security cannot be guaranteed. The other issue is safety, as Mr. Zhang mentioned. So actually, I traveled almost all along the Chinese milkway. I mean, where they supply the milk. Individual households, they keep 3 cows and maximum 8 cows. You cannot really ensure the quality. The electricity supply is not there. And why Chinese milk has a lot of antibiotics, because the they do not have the right way to milk the cow. So therefore, they use antibiotics if they hurt the cow. So this way, the fertilizer, excessive use of pesticides are inevitable because individual households, they do not have the right knowledge, they do not have the right facility for a scientific way of farmland operation. So that also gives a further push for the continued land reform for this round.
Yeah, I just like add one point, that is in China now, both government and enterprises already realize the importance of this point, green agricultural products. So now actually we started to study and chase green global value chain. That means we will not produce green products in China. Meanwhile, also we will import some of green products from other economies, such as soybean, this type of products.
What about the environmental pollution in rural areas? The alleged sharp decline of the environmental conditions is due to urbanization and the rapid expansion of township enterprises, industrial wastes, so on and so forth. Is it a potentially devastating threat to the health of villages?
It is not potential, it is realistically a devastating threat already. So actually, a couple of weeks ago, I talked with an expert with the Chinese Ministry of Agriculture. They said, okay, there's almost no place that we can plant the right herbal medicine anymore because of the soil pollution, because of the water pollution. So therefore, they go to Kazakhstan, they go to Africa to find the right place. But if we do not change the way of operation of Chinese farmland, and we are going to pollute even along the Belt and Road. So this is something that we got to be very much alert. So the basic calculation is that we use 3 times of the pesticides as compared with the developed economies. We use almost 4 times of the fertilizer, but the production yield is not there. But as a result, the antibiotics in every body of the Chinese is almost 6 times as compared with those individual person of those developed world. So this is really a scary picture, and it is definitely a vicious cycle that we have to address.
Almost exactly 2 years ago, the first environmental protection law went into effect, January the 1st, 2015, and yet people seldom heard any people being punished as a result of violating the environmental law. What's wrong with either the execution or the oversight? Is it still an ugly fact that to guarantee local GDP growth rate, the local authorities open one eye and close the other for the sources of pollution?
Yeah. I think this is a very complicated issue. Actually, all of those factors you mentioned exist. Especially, I think that now one thing is that now China is still in progress of industrialization and urbanization. So that means you can find that so lot of factories or plants, existing in those rural areas. And meanwhile, if you look at these equipments, their techniques actually quite behind compared with those in developed economies. But in China, actually, if you look at our laws and regulations on environmental protection, we already have a series of different laws and regulations on pollution prevention and including water, air, and waste, solid waste. But I think that laws and those laws implementation that is a very big tough mission because there are so lot of enterprises in China, and in order to promote those implementation, you have to take a long time. You have to have so lot of inputs on that, so not easy.
The first organic law of village committee election was drafted back in 1988, and very quickly it went into effect despite the tragedy in 1989 to guarantee the establishment of local self-rule in villages. I mention this fact in the hope of relating this to what you call financing at the rural level in terms of handling the housing property or housing assets. I'm talking about the circulation of land or land transactions. Can you brief us on major problems concerning financing vehicles or debts?
Yeah, in the past, for farmers, it was very difficult to get loans from the banks because both their house assets and their farmland actually belonging to villages committee, belonging to collective. They have no right, to make land or house to become, mortgage in order to get loans. But that the situation has been changed right now. As I know, now in more than 28 counties in China, they already started their pilot projects. So that means farmers is allowed to make their house assets or their farmland as a mortgage to banks. And then they can get loans from banks and they can start their new business or their new life, in other places or do their own business. In this regard, I think this is a very big change. Also, this is a reform. But the challenge will be that now there is still a critical challenge. That is, in case these farmers, he used up all of those money borrowed from the banks, they have no money to return to the banks. So bank will, maybe settled these type of assets, but according to the existing rules and regulations, bank just can find potential buyers within the villager committee instead of the whole market.
I think there is still another question, that is ambiguity for the usage, because the disposable rights for the land use is still unclear. For example, if I grow corn, and then I can easily, of course, transfer to another one that grows corn. But if the other one wanted to build a house, so that's not permissible. But what if the other one wanted to raise pigs? Then they want to set up some other infrastructures on the land. So are those infrastructures permissible by law? So they're not really completely clear. And even if they want to set up a, say, temp house, whether it is permissible, because there are a number of loopholes. Actually, many people are getting engaged. So, okay, I apply for a temporary building, but in the end, they get really perpetuated. So these issues are still there in the gray area.
I was wondering aloud why. I was wondering if such problems could be addressed at the level of the village committee, because despite the democratic election for the village head, the party secretary is still ahead of the elected village head, and that's something that I discovered through many visits and interviews with villagers quite a few years ago. But you are watching Dialogue with Mr. Zhang Jianping and Mr. Liu Baocheng. They are experts of agricultural economics, and we'll be back in a short while. Stay with us, please. Welcome back. We've been talking about the sense of security for villagers and the farmers. Now, one of the problems could be, according to the Ministry of Agriculture, over 30% of rural land has been leased out. Now, will the rural land right reforms pave the way for large-scale farm consolidation and agricultural modernization? What are the advantages of farm consolidation?
Yeah. If you look at those developed economies, for example, in the US and in Japan, actually, their population in agriculture sectors only about 1%. So that means that most of the population actually they rely on non-agriculture sectors. But in China, you can find that nowadays, in my mind, 28% of producers in agriculture sectors, that means in China's population, just contributed to China's GDP about 9%. So the efficiency is very low. So in the future, how to improve our efficiency, how to improve our productivities. So that means we have to make so a lot of farmers leave their land. Actually, they need to move to the urban areas. That's urbanization process. Meanwhile, more and more farmers need to become service provider or workers in urban areas, and then just a few population they can concentrate it on agriculture sectors, and then the efficiency will be improved.
Yes, we are talking about efficiency and the productivity of farmers. Can the wide use of mechanized production means help promote efficiency?
Of course. I think that one thing is this mechanized, this type of model, because in developed economies they already accumulated so a lot of experiences. Even if in China now in some provinces they started this type of progress, just the areas is not so big. So the reform means that we will expand this type of model.
What about the dripping technology that we have imported from Israel so that the irrigation can be remarkably improved and avoid a huge waste of water resources?
Well, those are showcases, and so they are not really getting prevalently applied to the Chinese agriculture industry. Actually, now you don't have to go to very far. Go out of the 6th Ring Road of Beijing. You still see people are operating almost in the same way as people 2,000 years ago on their farm, driving a cow with a plow invented by Qu Yuan, 2,000 years ago, and with the shovel, that can date back also 2,000 years ago. So nothing almost has changed in vast regions in China for 2,000 years. That's quite a shame. So as Mr. Zhang mentioned, actually, very small portion of population in those developed economies like Israel, like the United States, they are operating on big farms, and you feel proud to be a farmer, to be a country boy. But in China, the almost 30% of the entire population are engaged in farm work, and still we need to import volumes of soybeans, cotton, and wheat, whatsoever. So if we do not really change this picture, and we think, well, because the farmland can hide unemployment, because even if you're idling on the farm, you are employed by the farm. So this is really self-cheating. So we gotta be
great changes have taken place over the past 3 decades, but we are still not sure if there is enough arable land to guarantee agricultural production. For example, there are concerns over Chinese real estate companies snapping up cheap rural land and then flipping it for more profitable commercial usage. How concerned are you that farmers may be cheated or forced into trading their land or eventually lose their land?
Yeah, actually in China, those rural land, those land in rural areas actually belonging to agriculture land. In urban areas, according to our urban planning, actually that's belonging to commercial use land or maybe industrial using land. So this is a illegal. This is a legal, arrangement. So in rural areas, in case that they change this type of land characters, they use, agriculture land. They make agriculture land becomes, commercial land or real estate land without permission from government. That means illegal. And also, that in case this type of things has been found, that means the owners will be punished.
I would really question, whether the 1.8 billion acres of land that is set as a red line, but how scientifically, how sustainably we arrived on this figure. Does it mean that if the productivity remains the same in the Chinese agriculture, we need 1.8 billion acres of land to feed Chinese people? But if productivity increase by 3-folds, or even 5-folds as compared with those developed agricultures, do we need that much arable land anymore? So I think that's a big question lying ahead.
Our dietary habits have changed remarkably. Instead of relying on staple food, like what happened 3 decades ago. Now, let's look at the hukou system, the household registration system. Without a reform of such a system, I'm afraid migrant workers in their millions won't be accommodated properly. They will not be housed properly. Their education will not be given equal access, and to say nothing of up to 9 million left behind children in rural areas. What can you tell us about any progress concerning social security program that can guarantee dignity and rights of this large disadvantaged social group who have changed the skyline of urban areas?
Yeah, this year there is a very important progress. That is in all our provinces in China. Actually, agriculture hukou has been cancelled. So that means that today in China there will be no two type of hukou. One is agricultural hukou, another is non-agricultural hukou. So actually nowadays today in China just one type of hukou, that is residence hukou. So I think this very big progress will make there is no farmers, non-farmers, this type of system. This is one thing. Also that will promote our more equal development both in rural area and urban areas. This is one thing. The second thing is that now if you look at China's social security system, as I know, more than 95% of China's rural residents has been covered by disease, serious disease medical insurance system. This is a progress. In my mind, maybe by the end of 2020, all of those farmers will be covered. But I think that for jobless issues, or maybe for their life insurance issues, also we need to increase guarantee for those farmers. That means we can make farmers livelihood more with more dignity.
I'm sorry, we don't have enough time to address yet another important problem concerning slums. Now, since labor mobility is guaranteed with the rapid pace of urbanization, millions of migrant workers came to urban areas, but we seldom see any slums today in the city proper. Why? Very quickly.
Well, actually, they are still in the suburban area. You see those scanty houses. The Premier Li Keqiang made a very great focus on how do we dismantle those scanty houses. So they are quality slums, but of course they are not as comparable to those.
In India.
Yeah, well, those in India, those even in Philippines,
and in Brazil.
In Kenya, Brazil, whatsoever.
Thank you very much. That's the end of this edition of Dialogue with Liu Baocheng and Zhang Jianping. We'll see you next time. Until then, goodbye.